Good evening, everyone. Albert Gibbs here, founder and CEO of the AG Leadership Academy. Thank you all for joining us this evening. So I'm very excited about today's panel and today's discussion. Before we get started, I just want to introduce some of you that have never joined us a little bit. I want to introduce you to the AG Leadership Academy, who we are and what we do. So the AG Leadership Academy is actually we are a South Florida-based nonprofit, and we really focus on mentoring and creating the leaders of tomorrow today. And so, some of the things that we do is, as you can see on the screen, we're very big into community service. So we actually are part of the Florida Highway Transportation Adopt a Highway program. If you see in the middle, some of my middle school students are always doing a sales enrichment camp. And to the far left, some of my students, when we went to go visit Les Brown, just so, to expose the different students to various different things. So some of the programs that we do here at the AG Leadership Academy, scholarships, we have a scholarship based out of Deerfield Beach High School. We really big on community service, STEM camps, mentorship, and educational forums. So this summer, we are focusing on a 5-part speaker series. We already had one two weeks ago. So that one's about being a Division I athlete and transitioning into the workforce after that. Today, we're going to talk about keys to success. Then it's going to be keys to being hired for internships, keys to being accepted into master's programs, and getting into college 101. So I'm extremely excited to introduce you to my panel tonight. I go back with both of these panelists some years, some more than the other. So first off, I want to introduce Jill Solomon, and then Ednis, you can follow after Professor Solomon speaks.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm very pleased to be asked to participate in this online webinar with you tonight. I taught marketing for over 23 years at the University of South Florida in Tampa, and I was also the advisor to the collegiate chapter of the American Marketing Association. And you'll learn more about that later. My students were asked to, all the chapters give a report every year on what they've accomplished. And my students consistently ranked as high as number 2 and as low as number 23, I think. But we were always in the top 25. So I'm very proud of that. And along with my husband, Dr. Paul Solomon, who teaches marketing at USF as well, I've led 2 study abroad trips. The first one was to Wales, and the first one was to France, and the last one was to Wales. My love of teaching really came from my mother. If you had an elementary school teacher that you just loved, that was my mother. And so I'm going to add that as a little bit of context. When I went to college, I did 3 years in a row. I went summers, and I just finished college in 3 calendar years. I was kind of eager to move on. I had other things I wanted to do, and that's how I did college. But when I was in college, 1967 to 1970, it was very similar in some ways to what's going on today, because it was a time of major social unrest. My freshman year, Martin Luther King was assassinated, Robert Kennedy was assassinated, cities all across the United States were burning. There were protests against the Vietnam War. I was in the streets of Statesboro, Georgia, marching to the county courthouse for what we called civil rights. Today we call it social justice. And I was also protesting the Vietnamese War. I didn't think we needed to be there. And I was also at the very first Earth Day. So that's a little bit about my background.
Thank you so much. Ednis?
Yeah, again, a pleasure to be here, everybody. It's an honor to be on the panel. I was a AG Leadership Academy mentee. I was actually in the first class when Mr. Gill started it in 2016. I was in IB I was doing the IB program. So I was just running, through my classes and stuff. And scholarship came out, and I wasn't really into doing scholarships, but one of my teachers kept pushing me. I was like, do it, do it, do it. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. And that was the gift scholarship that I applied for. And that was the first time I met him and met his friend, and we were talking. And ever since then, it's been like a fruitful relationship 4 years later. So I was doing IB, basically got a year's worth of credits done. So I came in to college as a sophomore. So I finished in 3 years. I just kind of kept pushing myself, got through, took a lot of summer classes as well. So I finished kind of early. Now, again, doing masters. I started last fall, and again, I just kept pushing myself, taking extra classes here and there. So by the end of this fall, I should have my master's degree as well. And that pretty wraps up my college career right now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. So, so we're going to do a few different things this evening. So, one of the things about the AG Leadership Academy is we really push leadership. So we want the students to be leaders amongst their peers, to be leaders in the community, and then also leaders in the classroom. And so that's what we're going to focus on this evening. And so, Ednis, I'm going to start with you, and then Professor Solomon, I'm going to come back to you shortly. So, Ednis, I just want you to kind of walk us through, some of the things that you feel really kind of push you to excel in the classroom so far.
I think one of the biggest things is just like, I had a love for learning, honestly. I love to learn. I like to read books. I just had a passion to know more. I feel like that really helps you. If you kind of enjoy the process of learning and you embrace the journey, like, it just makes it so much easier to deal with. Now, I mean, granted, there are some classes that you like more than others, but as long as you embrace the challenge of like trying and, getting to understand a little bit more day by day, like, it kind of works itself out. And then, as you go to college, that route opens up. You get to learn more about what you want to know, versus high school, where sometimes you kind of get stuck into subjects you don't really, care for at the beginning. But
definitely. Go ahead, continue.
Oh yeah. And then I think another thing about the journey is just, I would definitely say time management. That's a big one for sure, because if you don't have time management, especially when you get to college, like, a lot of that kind of stuff just catches up to you really quickly. It's important for you to kind of, divvy up your time properly. That way you can get through a lot of your assignments. Same in high school. It's a good trait to really start developing over there.
Definitely. And to all of our attendees, just want to encourage everyone, we are going to have a Q&A portion towards the end. So if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A box or in the chat window. And then when we get to that piece, just raise your hand and we'll enable you to speak. So Ednis, another thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, one thing about when you're successful and when you do well is, you always notice, people that did not, follow that same path, maybe weren't as lucky. So what are some of the pitfalls that you've seen from like some of your peers, whether at the high school level, because we have some high school students with us this evening, and at the college level? So what are some of those pitfalls that you've seen your peers suffer from?
I'd definitely say for sure one of those things is putting too much on your plate. Like, that'll get you every time. There's a quote that I always think about. It's like, you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything you want. So it's like, you can do whatever you feel like doing, but you can't do it all at the same time. If you try to do the clubs, do the school, do the honor society, do this, do that, like, sometimes you just run out of energy and you run out of time. Even though you want to do everything, you got to start picking and choosing. So that really caught up to people I knew in college, because, they were trying to work full-time jobs and go to school full-time. Some of them like had kids, and then they were trying to join clubs. They were trying to party. So like, that kind of stuff really, really catches up to you for sure. And then I'd say the second thing again is time management. Like, again, starting even in high school, like, if you're the type of person that you put all your homework on the back end, you're trying to see how much fun you can have first before you get your homework done. Yeah, it eventually comes to bite you when those final papers and those assignments come around. Yeah, like, you have a few stressful days, in the weeks ahead for sure. And so it's not fun to be that person.
Definitely. And so I remember when I left for college many, many moons ago, almost 20 years, without saying my age, what for me, the biggest transition was the freedom. I came from a household where my parents were very strict, very religious upbringing, and very, very serious about schoolwork. So for me, just to have that freedom where I can wake up and sleep in, or there's no accountability because I'm away in the dorm room. So that was something that I definitely struggled with. My first semester in college was just how to embrace all of this freedom. So for you, what was the hardest transition from high school to college?
I think my hardest transition was, yeah, I think my hardest transition was being careful not to overload myself with work, because I was always good in school with like academics and stuff. And when I was in high school, I was also in band, like I was in IB, I was taking like the AP classes and all that. So I felt like I was more than capable of just running through my classes in college. I felt like, yeah, I was on top of the world. But you start to see how draining it becomes on your energy. And if you also take on a part-time job, or you're trying to join an honor society or do networking with people, you start to see how tough it actually becomes on like your mental health and needing to relax a bit. So that was probably my toughest transition, realizing that I needed to take a little bit more time off for myself, rather than, just trying to go all in and burning myself out in the process. So that
Yeah.
balance, I was trying to work on finding like a healthy balance.
Yeah, and when you get into the corporate world, we call it your work-life balance. And so burnout is a real thing, especially right now when we're all dealing with COVID-19 and we're all working remotely. Even myself, I find myself, 8, 9 o'clock at night, I haven't put down my laptop. I'm still working, making proposals for customers. But so, burnout is very serious and you have to be able to disconnect. So thank you for sharing that. So what are some of the advice that you would give to future or current college students, give them some tips of how you would recommend them to approach things to be successful in college?
All right. For those of you who are not in college yet, I would definitely say one of the first things is try to at least get some of those AP classes done. Like if you can take AP classes, if you're in IB, like please don't slack off. Keep going hard on those IB classes, because it just pays off so much. Like you're gonna save yourself, easily half a semester, a year worth of time. And it doesn't seem like a lot at the moment, but when you actually step on campus, it makes a big difference. And if you're taking out, financial aid loans, you're talking about you could save yourself 15 to 35 grand easy, on a semester. So while you can get that college education for free in high school, like take those classes, get them out the way. I think too, I'm pretty sure they have like placement exams in college too, like the TOEFL exams and stuff like that. There are certain classes you can take the exams to basically get out of the class. So if it's unnecessary, you don't have to take it. Look into those as well. Make sure you steady take those exams. That'll save you classes that, you don't need to take, which will shorten the time you spend in college. And again, if you're, taking out loans, that's like a few $1,000s that you're saving yourself in the long run that you can use in the future. And then again, like I would definitely say, if you're a college student, even in high school, one of the biggest things again is just like time management. Like please use your time wisely. Don't be the person who waits until the last minute to do your projects. Be the person who's more proactive. So like get your work done, as soon as possible, so you have more time to rest. Definitely when you're in college, oh yeah, and that ties back into Gibbs' last question. When you're in college, one of the things that will throw you off the most is the way that professors run their courses. Like when you're in high school, your professors you don't really know day to day what you're walking into. Like you have one textbook, but the homework, it could change. The reading assignment always changes. You just don't know. It's just whatever the professor feels like doing. But when you're in college, they tell you everything you're gonna do on the first day. They hand you that syllabus. They hand you the syllabus, and then they're like, "This is what we're learning. Like, get to it." So when they give you that syllabus, like print it out, have it saved on your desktop, hold on to it for dear life, and just start working on it. Don't, because your professors are not going to take, "Oh, I didn't know for an answer, or I didn't have a homework, or I didn't," like they don't, it doesn't work in college. You already had the syllabus. They gave it to you in advance. Just start working on it. An assignment is due next Tuesday. Just get it out the way before Tuesday. That way you can go to class and just be at like ease of mind. You can just focus on the work. You could even work on like your other classes. That way you're not always playing catch up when you're sitting in your class because, "Oh, I forgot my assignment. I forgot this. I forgot." No, you have everything in front of you. Literally just do it before you even get to class. It'll save you so much time. Like it'll be the best relief in the world. I'm telling you. It's wonderful.
Definitely. And remind me, how many AP courses did you go into college with? Like how many credits when you, I mean, I know you took several AP courses. I mean, how many credits did you go into college with?
Yeah, when I came out, I had like I think like 36. It was like 36 credits I came out with. So that was about a year. Yeah, literally a year's worth of school.
Exactly. And to your earlier point, that saves you a significant amount of money if you're taking out loans. So great tips. One of the things that I wanted to add to what you were saying about time management, something that I did when I was in college that for me it worked perfectly. For whatever reason, I always lived in apartments. I never really lived on a campus dorm. Even when I lived on campus, it was apartment style. So when I got back home, it always felt like, a frat house. Granted, I did join a fraternity eventually, but I never lived in a fraternity house. But just a lot of my friends would be there playing video games. And so what worked for me is if I had a class at 11 to 11:50, and then I didn't have another class until, let's just say, 2 o'clock that afternoon, I would grab lunch, I would go to the library, and I would do my assignments instead of just hanging out in the middle of the day. Because for one, the information is fresh in your brain, and it also it keeps you from being distracted. So I would leave from the library and then go into that next class already in that mindset. So, thank you so much for all of those tips. Definitely hang out with us. But I appreciate your time, and so we're going to transition over to Professor Solomon. And so I'm going to make sure she's unmuted. All right, there you are. All right, so just to give our audience a little history. So Professor Solomon was actually one of my marketing professors at USF, and we've stayed in contact, through LinkedIn, and she was one of my favorite professors, and I learned a lot from her, and I still learn from her. And so I'm just really, really grateful that you took the time to share this knowledge with the students, because one thing that I want to stress to our audience is many of us have our definitions of, okay, this is what I should do when I go to class, but it's not every day that you get to actually sit with someone who has 20 plus years in this industry and 20 years of teaching experience to give you some insight into what a professor is looking for. So with that, Professor Solomon, I know that you have over 20 years of teaching at the collegiate level, but how have students changed over that 20 years? And then what are some of your tips for students to be successful in college in today's times?
Well, there's a study done maybe about 3 years ago, and it was about the impact on, actually a lot of it was on mental health of students before the iPhone and after the iPhone. And some of the data out of that are just staggering. Because one of the things when I think maybe Ednis probably can back this up, is that most classes today are an hour and 15 minutes. And so like I taught marketing management, I taught international marketing, sometimes I taught promotion management, and those classes run for an hour and 15 minutes. So 23 years ago, I'd walk in the classroom, the students would have a notebook open, many of them would take notes, and I would lecture. I try to make my lectures very interactive, even back then, because I know people would rather interact than hear somebody go on and on and on. But what I've seen now, and especially in the last 6 or 7 years, is that students cannot focus. They cannot come to class and manage to focus for an hour and 15 minutes. They just can't do it. So a lot of people who've come into teaching in the last few years, one of my colleagues at USF said, "Oh, I do everything in 15-minute cycles because I know I can't hold their attention more than 15 minutes." So if you're going to college and you get one of those people, you're probably really lucky. But in my classes, I broke up topics, but I always had a lecture portion, and that would probably go 30 minutes or 30, 40 minutes in a class. And the thing that's different today is how students learn. You know, and Albert, you can back this up, I'm sure. You've got to be able to go to class and focus for that hour and 15 minutes, because that's what happens when you graduate and you go to get a job. You have to be able to focus all day long. And so, you know, I go to class, and so this is typical. So most of my classes had somewhere between 40 and 50 students. And the students would come, you knew who they were first day. They go sit in the back row, they open their laptops, and their heads are down the whole time. You know they're not engaged in class. And then there are other students who come in and bring their women with big purses or backpacks, and they put it on the table in front of them so they can have their phones there, and they're doing this all during class. I'm like, why are you even here? You know, and I call students out and I'd say, listen, if you can't focus in class, how are you going to focus on a job? I just call them out. I think the good thing about students today is they tend to be nicer people. I really believe that. I think they're much kinder to each other, at least in class. And they're less competitive, and they're much more cooperative. All of my classes, most business classes at USF have team projects, because when you go into the work world, you're often organized in teams. And so I've seen a lot of team dynamics over the years. And one of the things I see is that students feel bad when they let somebody down. Not everybody, trust me. It's not everybody who says, oh, because there's always a slacker in the class. You know, you just, the first day, you just want to stand up and say, would all the slackers go to that corner and you be on a team together and everybody else would be really successful? But of course you can't do that. But it was just, you know, it's something that faculty members recognize, that you're going to have problems like that. So I love what Ednis said. He said he loves to learn. And when I made my notes, that was a phrase I picked out, right? So I can't tell you how many letters of recommendation I wrote over 23 years. And one of the things that I always thought about was, is this a student who loves to learn? Because if they do, they have that hallmark of success. So be the person like Ednis who loves to learn. Come to class, be able to focus. And some of the best students I ever taught were student athletes. Why? Because they were all on scholarship, and they knew that the athletic department would ask every faculty member for a midterm report on how they were doing in the class. And they knew they were going to be graded on that back at the athletic center. And so they had it drilled into them. Go to class. They usually came in, they sat in the first row or the second row, usually right in front of me. And they concentrated in class just like they concentrated in sports. And I really appreciated that they had that ability to focus. One of my favorite student athletes brought his textbook to class every day and sat right in front of me. And as I went through the topics for discussion of the day, he flipped through his textbook, and he read the whole textbook sitting in class. And so he was hearing it, and he was seeing it, and he was integrating it. And he always made the highest grade in the class. Big football player. Yeah, I just thought that was, I asked him about it, but he said it's the way I learn. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
So I think, backing up what Edna said, be the person who loves to learn. Hold yourself accountable, just like those student athletes who know that they're going to be held accountable by the athletic department. you know,
Very
because
cool.
you want to send the right signal to your teammates and to your faculty member, but you just want to be successful, and you need to develop these habits now, like in high school. If you're still in high school, develop those habits. You know, it's so easy today to be distracted by your cell phone or by your laptop. You know, there have been a lot of studies done on multitasking, and people think they're really good at it, and actually they're not. They're not really good at it. So every time you shift your attention from, say, reading a textbook to check your Facebook page, if you check your Facebook page 5 times an hour, you have lost so much attention span. You just lost it, and you may not know it. And there's Facebook, there's your texting, there's music in the background. It's try not to do that, right?
Yeah.
Every university that I know of has some kind of center that will help students learn how to study if they don't know how to study. So I say there are a lot of things, a lot of services on campus that students need to learn about. And yeah, like in my classes, I always had the librarian come and do library orientation. And students say, I never knew that there were these databases that existed. I'm like, you're a junior or senior in college, you don't know that by now? And they're like, no, I don't know that. Well, you know, not every faculty member is going to do that, but I found it really important because I had my students write big reports. In marketing management, they wrote reports that were 60 pages long, and they did it as a team. And
I remember.
yeah, you remember. Well, and Ednis was talking about how you get down to the end of the semester and you're scrambling to get all your work done if you haven't had good time management. One thing I did is I would not let them fail at that because it was such a big project. So what I would do is I would have them write their report in sections and turn it in all during the semester. And then I would come home and write all over what they wrote, right? And I would say, fix this, this is good, you need a better source, this is, you know, this is too old, have you thought about blah, blah, blah. And I'd hand it back to them. And I'd copy everything for myself. And then I hand it back to them. And by the end of the semester, I had a folder full of their work and they had. So when I read their final report, I knew exactly what I was looking for. But not everybody's going to do that. You know, I told them, you're going to get your hand held once in the marketing program, and it's going to be me. And after that, you're on your own. You're big boys and girls.
Yeah, no, great points, great points. And I definitely remember those 60-page group assignments. I never was a fan of group assignments. I think that's why I'm in sales today. Just me and the customer and the purchase order, not too many other people to get in my way. So, but one of the things that I do remember from being in college, you know, when I was at the University of South Florida, there were about 35,000 students. So in each class some of my classes cleared easily 200 students. And so one of the things that I made it a point to do was to build relationships with my professors. So that way they actually know who you are. They know you're just not a name on the roster. And so how important is that from a relationship building standpoint, do you think, Professor Solomon, to have those types of relationships if you're a student with your professor?
I think it's really important. You know, there's students like you that I've known for 15 years and stayed in touch with. There are a lot of students that I have a good relationship with while they're in school, and then maybe we lose touch when they go away. But I think that, you know, not every professor and every student's going to click, but I always appreciated those students who came up to me before or after class and said, oh, have you read this? Or did you see this I read this online and this is what we were talking about yesterday. And, you know, and they wanted to get to know me. Sometimes students just show up at office hours they do this much less today than they did 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And they come and, you know, sometimes they just want to chat, which I always welcomed. I'll tell you a story about this student I had. Her name was Rebecca Perrin, and I could tell she was really smart. She was from Panama, and when she came to USF, her spoken English wasn't very good. So she was a little shy about her language skills. But writing and reading, she was good, but she was worried about her spoken language. So she got a job at the math lab at USF. And she had just married before she left Panama. And her husband was a skydiving instructor. And she would like jump out of airplanes, okay?
Wow.
So I thought she had it all. She had great math skills. She had great business skills. And she was fearless. So one day I said, you need to come to my office. And she was like, what? I need to come to your office. I said, yeah. So she came to see me and I said, sit down. I said, you need to get a PhD in marketing and teach. And she just looked at me like I was crazy. She was like, I'm not smart enough to teach in college. I said, oh yeah, you are. You just don't know it yet. But you've got it. You've got it. So I taught her in marketing management, and then she was in the honors college, and I was also her thesis advisor for her honors thesis. And so, you know, every time I saw her in the hall between classes, I'd say something like PhD, PhD, and she'd kind of giggle and go away. And so she graduated. We stayed in touch for a couple of years. Then I kind of lost touch with her, and I was really disappointed because I thought, no, I want her to be one of those students who stays in touch. It pops up. She said, would you write me a letter for an MBA program? I said, of course, because you have to get an MBA before you can get a PhD. And she just laughed and giggled, and she did a beautiful job in her MBA program at Stetson. And then and she let me know, and I wrote letters. Man, I wrote letters for this girl for years. And then she called me up one day and she said, I can't get your voice out of my head. I'm thinking about a PhD. Can I come talk to you? So she did. Long story short, I made sure she talked to the people who had PhDs because I have an MBA, and I made sure she talked to the right people. Wrote emails and letters, and she's got her PhD from Central Florida. She's teaching at UC, University of California, San Marcos today, and a PhD, and she has this wonderful life that she didn't know she was going to have. But because she was Hispanic, there is a program in the state of Florida that's part of the McKnight Foundation, and every year they accept nominations from the McKnight Foundation is for Hispanic and Black PhD students. That's all. And so she nominated me for a mentor award. There are only I think 10 of us or 12 of us in the state of Florida who got mentorship awards. And Rebecca nominated me. She said she would have never been on that path unless she had come to my office and sat down and gotten to know me. So I think that's a great success story.
It
you
is.
know?
Yeah. That's how important mentoring is, even at the collegiate level, and, one of the things that, I remember just from our conversations, and I remember from my time in college is, the importance of the organizations that you become a part of, and surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals. The old saying is, show me your friends and I'll show you yourself. I don't really subscribe to that. However, I always tell the story about me and my two best friends growing up. So growing up, I had two best friends, Jason and Ray. And so all throughout high school, we all played sports and we're into different things in high school. And so all throughout high school, even when I knew that sports wasn't going to be anything that I was going to pursue past the high school level, but the three of us, it was always something where, oh, hey man, like I got into this college, or you should apply to this college. So we really kept each other accountable, from maybe the 10th grade on, where it was, okay, we're going to college. It was never any discussions. I mean, we had our fun, we did all the things that other teenagers do, but we always had those conversations about college. And so for me, when I was in my senior year, it wasn't really a discussion about, well, am I going to go to college? It was more so like, I'm going to go to this college because of this reason or because of this scholarship, for no other reason than I didn't want to be left behind by my friends. So the circle that you surround yourself with is extremely important. And so I know you were actually the America's Marketing Association Outstanding Advisor of the Year. So the AMA is a marketing student organization, but what, in your opinion, how important is it for organizations like AMA for student development, and then also from a networking perspective?
Well, I think one of the most important things is, you said 33,000 when you were at USF?
35.
35, yeah. There are 44,000 people on campus now. Well, not now, nobody's on campus right now. COVID, thank you. But we have 44,000 students on campus. And you wouldn't believe how much it's changed, because there's so much new student housing since you've been there. There's a whole Greek village now that's Greek housing. The campus is huge. And there's even a Publix on campus, a Publix grocery store.
I heard about that.
And yeah, it's pretty cool, really. So here's the thing for me. You're in a big school if you're at USF or UCF or FAU or FIU. Those are big campuses. So to find a place that you can call home, that's where you can make friends and find a smaller group of people who were like-minded in some way, I think it's really important. And I'm very prejudiced for academic professional organizations like American Marketing Association, because they bring you into experiences you couldn't get otherwise, right? So they're like, we had weekly meetings, and we alternated our meetings with a guest speaker or a workshop. But then we also did lots of field trips. So, corporate tours, we call them corporate tours. And so the Nielsen rating company,
yep,
that
media
rates TV and radio and lots of other things today. They're over in Oldsmar, 30 minutes from campus. We've been there. We've been to every professional sports team in Tampa Bay, but not to look at playing, but to look at how they do their marketing and what goes on behind the scenes. We've gone to numerous ad agencies, and we do a lot of corporate community involvement. And so the main charge of AMA is to use your marketing skills to give back to nonprofits. So we've done things with the Women's Homeless Shelter, or Shelter for Abuse. We've done the Humane Society. We've done, last year I was advisor, we really focused on food insecurity, and we worked a lot with Feeding Tampa Bay. There's a big arts festival here every year. It's Cal Gasparilla. We've done work for all of those groups in the community. And by doing that, students get to join committees and develop their own marketing skills, but they also develop their leadership skills. you got to be a leader, right? You've got to find some place to stand out. So there are organizations like AMA, which I'm obviously very keen on. We didn't get any money from the university. A lot of schools across the country, their deans give them money. Our deans gave us a pat on the back, saying, good job, stay in the top 20. And so we had a golf tournament, and it's a big deal to put on a golf tournament with a silent auction and a raffle. And we made over $15,000. Now just imagine being in college and saying, oh yeah, I was the vice president of the scramble, and my team went out and raised $15,000. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. Something you talk about at every interview you go to, right? So I think that organizations like AMA are really important, and you don't have to be a marketing major to join, right? Yep. But there are other professional organizations. There's an accountants association, an accountants group. There's actually a Black CPA group at USF, and just other student orgs out there. So I think those are really important things to do something that's professional. And I think it's really important to kind of find a home. For marketing majors, it was great because they got to see who they wanted to work with in their classes. And we had a few romances come out of that. We've had 2 or 3 marriages come out of meeting people at AMA. So you never know, right? You never know what kind of impact an organization like that can have. But I would say do something in a professional organization. And then if it's if the Greek life is really important to you, fine, go do your Greek life or do intramural sports, but do something where you find a home inside of a huge campus.
I mean, that's definitely something I know. We talk about leadership a lot, and I look back, and I think my first time really understanding outside of sports, right? When you play sports, you're a leader because if you're one of the better players, your teammates are going to look to you in critical situations. The coaches are going to look to you to lead practice. But it wasn't until I joined the fraternity and I was deemed the line president. So I was responsible for myself and all of my different line brothers, as we call them. And that was, I look at outside of sports and outside of some different organizations I did in high school, but that was one of the times where I think I really built a lot of my critical leadership skills. And so I want to jump in with some questions from the audience, if you don't mind, Professor Solomon.
Sure.
So John Wilson, I'm going to unmute you so you can go ahead and answer your question. So 1 second, John, and I'll tell you when you can talk. So John Wilson, go ahead, and you go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Jill, and thank you for taking time out your busy schedule to be one of the panelists. And thank you, Albert, for putting this together.
No problem.
Jill, as an instructor for 23 years, has there ever been a student that you still think about to this day who you couldn't quite reach and you wish you could have reached them because you've seen how much potential they have? And if so, how has that impacted the way you approach students with similar characteristics? And second question is, just tell us how bad Albert really was.
Here's what I remember about Albert, and he refreshed my memory the other day, so that's something I didn't quite have in mind. He was in Big Brothers, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, I guess is the organization.
Big Sisters. Yep.
And he came to class with his he brought his little brother to class, and he walked up to me and he said, "Is it okay if my little sits in?" I'm like, "Sure, absolutely." And then I got to know him a little bit better, and he told me he was writing poetry, and he shared some of his poetry with me, and then he published a book and had a reading at Borders bookstore, and he asked me to go. invited me. I was very proud to be invited. So I can't say that Albert was ever like, I don't have any bad stories to tell you about Albert. I guess that's the thing. When you ask me about the students you can't reach, the first thing that crossed my mind was a student I was very close to who committed suicide. And that haunts me to this day. She was really smart. She was in the honors college, and she had an eating disorder. And it was a lot more involved, but she kind of latched onto me. She didn't have she lived with her father. She didn't have a good relationship with her mother. And she used to talk to me, and I'm like, she didn't want to tell me too much about eating disorder, but she said she was getting counseling and she was eating and she was not binging and purging and all of that. And she had a doctor's appointment on a Tuesday, and Tuesdays were my really long class days. So I went into my office in between classes and I sent her a quick email. I'm like, how did the doctor appointment go? And she said, oh, he says I'm doing great. She killed herself that night. So, I mean, that's something that you'll never get over, right? You just don't get over that. But what I used to do before I started having so many classes and so many students, I used to have 90 students a semester, and then I ended up having like 180. So just the logistics of that changed. But probably when Albert was in school, I was still having my marketing management students come talk to me for 10 minutes. I put that in my syllabus. You have to come talk to me for 10 minutes. And I would say, I don't care what it is we talk about. You can talk about the bucks. We can talk about your dog, your vacation. We can talk about school or careers and options you have there. But you just have to talk to me. And I really enjoyed doing that. I was so sad when I was kind of like forced to give it up because of the time and too many students. But I learned a lot from doing that. I learned, and my students really appreciated it too. I know they did because they made comments in the course reviews about it. But the students, when you feel like you can't reach them. I had one kid who was so smart and he was so nice and he was so hyper, and he would come to class and fall asleep. And this was back when everybody got a cell phone for the first time. So this must have been about 2007 or 8, somewhere 9, someplace in there. And I used to go take his cell phone out of his hand and put it on the edge of the chalkboard or the whiteboard, so because he couldn't help himself. And I really tried to make him stay awake, but I just couldn't. And then I found out that he got hired for a job, and he went to orientation, and he fell asleep during the orientation. And I thought, oh Lord, I can't control that, but it makes you feel bad when you see somebody who's got potential and you can't reach them. Obviously, it makes you feel bad. Yeah.
And so I have another question. So Torrance Williams, if you want to, I muted you, Torrance. So if you want to ask your question, go ahead.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. I'm Torrance Williams. I'm a mentee of Mr. Gibbs, and I just want to thank you, Professor Solomon, for all your activism that you were talking about in the 60s and whatnot, and really pioneering that movement, especially with young people. I am definitely somebody that's definitely walking in your footsteps at this time. And second of all, go Bulls. I am a Bull alumni.
Yeah.
And third, I wanted to ask you, for all of the students who see what's going on right now and say that they want to get involved and, really want to become a part of their community, what advice would you give to, kids either in high school right now or coming into college or, in that stage? What advice would you give them?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Well, I'm going to tell you, I've been so upset all this year with George Floyd and the protest and the, but I've been so glad too, because when I was marching in the streets back in the 60s, I was in a little small college town. I mean, Statesboro, Georgia is tiny, was like 20,000 people, right? It was a small town. There weren't as many white people in those marches then and so that's one thing I've been really so taken by, is that the people in the marches today, it's every color, it's every sexual orientation, it's just people, right? So I've been really, really thrilled with that. I guess I would say to college students today that they need to connect with what's going on campus, because there's an incredible movement on campus. Even though I'm not there today, I've seen it over the years. I know that there has to be a Black Lives Matter group on campus. And I know that there has to be there's a lot of social justice movement on campus. So I would say probably get organized through your college, or maybe through your church if your church is doing things. But I would say do something that's meaningful to you, because I think it stays with you. It stays with you, and you may not do a lot, but you do something.
Yeah, no, that's very important. It's the activism. Me personally, I always tell people, there's several levels to activism, and each one is so important. So each one is so important, and it is important that I see the youth, and I was moved. I was like, wow, I call them kids because they seem so young to me now.
Yeah.
In my late 30s. But I was extremely impressed by the kids, and just to see that level of the passion, because today's society, you don't see kids passionate about too much outside of a lot of social media craziness and things like that. So to see all, like you mentioned, all the different races and orientations of all of these kids just joining together was extremely powerful. So I really, really, really am proud of this next generation. And so, the kids that are on the call today that are a part of that movement and part of that generation, kudos to you, and just please keep it up and don't give up. And so,
Yeah,
Professor Solomon, before we go into some open discussion with some of the audience members, wanted to go back to you. What other advice would you like to share with the audience that we weren't able to cover today?
Okay, one of the things I mentioned earlier, that I had been on 2 study abroad trips. The first one that Paul and I did was to France in 2003. And it was just amazing. Now, I've been to 22 countries. I've traveled a lot. My first trip to Europe was when I was 22 or 23 years old. And I've been to Europe a lot. I've been to Asia. I've been to China, Japan, Hong Kong, Korea. I've been through the Caribbean. Most of my trips have been to Europe, because the Solomons love wine, and their vacations usually end up going to a place where grapes are grown and wine is made. So France is one of our favorite places. But I would just say, I hope you can travel on your own. I hope you have that opportunity If your family can do trips, fantastic. But there's something about a study abroad trip that's really different. First of all, when we went to France, we had 23 students. And most of them are undergrads, but we had about 7 or 8 master's level students with us as well. And we did, our host school did part of the instruction, and then Paul and I did the other part of the instruction for the marketing course that they were getting credit for at USF. But there's always a lot of things that you would never get to do if you just went on vacation. Like we had company site visits. We went to several different kinds of companies, and we went to the port in Le Havre, France. And if you're studying distribution, you know, what you see at a port is just unbelievable. But we also, both study abroad trips, what we've done, they have a big cultural component. So in France, they had host families that came and took our students for a night and took them to their homes, most of them to their homes for dinner. And in Wales, we went into what had been a working coal mine that had been converted into a museum. And I'll never forget that. That was one of the most impactful things I've ever done, is to go into a coal mine and see how the miners lived and how the little kids worked in the coal mine. So when we were in France, we were in Normandy. The school was the Normandy Business School. And we went to all the D-Day beaches. We went to the American Cemetery. So there's just so much that you do in a study abroad trip that has to do with your professional insights that I highly recommend them. And I would say, you know, if you're going to be a freshman, try to plan on being on a study abroad trip if you can. They're not cheap, right? So you have to pay your tuition plus your other fees. But every one of my kids that went on study abroad got some kind of scholarship from USF. But you're going to end up probably spending more money than you think you will. So if you're a freshman, tell your academic advisor, hey, when I get to be a junior, I want to do a study abroad trip. What do I have to do now to plan for that? I would definitely say that. Our past president, Dr. Genshaw, said if she could make it happen, every single student at USF would do study abroad. And yeah. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually did a study abroad to London while at USF, and that was amazing. And I actually have a friend of mine, Daniel. I wanted him to introduce himself. Daniel and I were speaking the other night, and he has a very extensive study abroad and studying abroad history. So Daniel, you're unmuted. So if you want to just introduce yourself and share your experiences of living abroad while studying.
So, hi, my name's Daniel Kvarnberg, and as Albert says, he and I have known each other for many years. We used to work at Citrix together, and I think one of the things that actually made us become better friends is that we used to mess with each other about USF and UCF, because I promised I wouldn't say anything about USF because I'm a UCF guy, but you guys have a great program over there, and Professor Solomon, you're spot on when you talk about the study abroad. I did a program for my master's where every semester I lived in a different country.
Wow.
So I lived in Germany, Poland, and China. And not only did we study there, but each school we studied at sent students to study with us. And we all traveled together. And you really learn the differences between the cultures and also the similarities when you're in that cohesive group. And we, you know, as you were saying, when you have to work in a group, we had to write our master's thesis as a group. So it was extremely eye-opening. And to Professor Solomon's point, do anything you can, no matter what. If you have the option to study abroad at all, do it, because it will open your eyes and change you in ways you'll never, you can't comprehend until you do it. And you'll realize how much you've changed when you come home, because you will see things you've never seen. You'll experience things you never would have experienced. And it just really opens your eyes about the world, that, you know, when you're meeting locals and talking to these people and understanding what their lives are like, it really is I feel a fundamental of what everyone should learn, and especially Americans, because Americans typically don't travel outside of the US very much, whereas in most of the world makes an effort to travel. And so if you can, absolutely do your best to do it.
Definitely. I remember when I lived in London, one of the things that living in London, and while I was staying in London, I traveled all over, because even the internship that I had, we didn't work on Fridays because it was encouraged for us to take those weekend trips. And it's so much easier to travel in between different countries in London. And when I came back, I just remember the curiosity that I had about the world and about things outside of my point of view and outside of Florida, quite frankly. It just was tenfold, to the point where I had an internship and I had an offer to go back to Citrix when I finished college, and I turned it down and ultimately moved to California. And the reason why was I was like, I lived in Florida my entire life. I can always come back to Florida, which I did. But that curiosity really, really, really kicked in while I was studying abroad. And to your point, Daniel, just to meet so many different people from so many different cultures, it was amazing. And it was funny because a good friend of mine, we would joke with everybody and say we were brothers. His name was Roberto. He was an exchange student from Mexico, and I was Albert from America. And so we would always joke with everybody in our program, like, oh yeah, this is my long lost Mexican brother. And we're still friends to this day. He just found me on Facebook maybe 2 weeks ago. And so, you know, those relationships really last, and it was extremely impactful to me. And so I encourage any young student on this call in college, headed to college, if you have that opportunity to study abroad, take advantage of it. It will change your life, I promise you. Daniel, anything else that you wanted to add based on kind of what you've been listening to today?
Yeah, so, you know, to add on to your point about what you say in the sense of, you know, experiencing new things when you travel abroad, for those of you that are about to go to school, go to university, you know, when you get there, do everything you can to get outside of your comfort zone. I remember my freshman year, you know, I had gone to UCF, and my English teacher was offering extra credit, and to go with her they were doing a slam poetry night. I had never heard of that. I didn't know anything about it. And I just remember going and being in absolute awe at these people, you know, getting up there and doing this rap style poetry. And, you know, where I'm from, I had never heard of it. And, you know, and that was one of those things where I did everything I could to meet new people. You know, there's times when you need the comfort of being around people from home. And I had my friends from my hometown that went to school, but the rest of the time I was out meeting new people. I was joining the different clubs and things that I wouldn't even necessarily have normally been that passionate about. I wanted to just check something new out, you know, and it doesn't take that much time. And who knows, you might meet some really interesting, cool people that, you know, I'm still friends with 20 years later, because I went to like the astronomy club. You know, those are the things that you should do while you're at college. Is, you know, you should focus on studying, but you should also do everything you can to experience new things, because that's how you'll grow as a person. And, you know, grow your network. You never know who you're going to meet and where they're at in 10, 20 years. It might be helping you get a job. You know, you never know how it works.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Daniel. So Professor Solomon, back to you, but because we're getting ready to kind of close out shortly. I have a few of my AG Leadership Academy new mentors on the line. So Daniel is one of them. So Daniel, thank you so much for volunteering your time to help the next generation, and thank you for your thoughts today. But Professor Solomon, before I want to introduce some of the other mentors that are on the line this evening, any other thoughts that you wanted to share with us before we close out?
Yes. let me just tack on one more thought about study abroad. Last year, my husband and I both got an email from one of the students who were in the 2003 class to France, and she had got she got a graduate degree, and she came back to USF, and she's actually an advisor in the Honors College. And she wrote me and she said, or she wrote us and she said, that trip changed my life, and I still think about it today. And I just want to circle back and say thank you for making that happen, making the trip the way it was. So yeah, study abroad really, really changes things.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is that I had a sign on my door. Well, I had two signs. One connects to study abroad, and it was from St. Francis of Assisi, that said, "The world is a book, and those who have not traveled have only read one page." So I think
true.
that speaks for itself.
Very true.
Speaks for itself. I had another sign on my door that said, "Good writing equals good jobs." So if you're not a good writer, I mean, I would say out of a class of 50, I probably would have maybe 8 or 9 people who are decent writers, for whatever reason. So communication is so important in school and work, both written and oral communication. So if you know your writing skills aren't great, then you need to fix that, and you need to fix it before you get out of college. A lot of times when you go for an internship interview or job interview, you're asked to do a writing sample, and and if you can't pass muster, you probably won't get the job. But like at USF, the College of Business has a BizCom Center, and they're just to work with business students. And the university has a writing commons in the library, so it's open most of the time. So if you don't have those good skills, you need to think about how you can beef those things up. I sent Albert my style guide for my classes and some PowerPoint decks that I'm happy for you to share with anybody that I gave to all my students. And they were like things that if you just fix these 18 things, your writing would be so much better. Like, do you know the difference between ITS, IT apostrophe S, and ITS apostrophe, oops, that last one's not really a word, so don't use it. But there are just simple things that you can do to make yourself better and make yourself, more appreciated. People are going to get a job more than likely when they got out of school. But I always tell my students, I said, it's not the job that you get right now that I'm concerned about. It's the promotion in 2 or 3 years. If you can't communicate effectively, that promotion is going to go to somebody else who's better than you. So I think it's really important. It sounds kind of like Debbie Downer, but it's like it's something that is important because you're talking about life skills. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you brought up a really, really important point. The resources, so for the college students that are on the calls, it doesn't matter if it's a USF or UCF. I mean, majority of colleges these days have resources for you, whether it's writing centers, hours with your professors. Take advantage of that. One of the classes I struggled with was business calculus. I hated business calculus. However, I refused to fail that class. So, I probably spent just as much time in the math center the semester I took business calculus as I spent in the actual course, and so, you have to take advantage of those resources. So, when you get to college, for those of you that are leaving to go to college, or for those of you that are already in college, just take advantage of whatever resources, do your research, talk to your professors, talk to different people, talk to people that are there, that have been there longer than you. So if you're a freshman, ask, juniors or seniors, hey, what do you do when you're struggling in the class? What are some of the resources that you take advantage of? So, that's very, very important. Now I just want to make sure we get that across on today's call before we conclude. So another gentleman that I wanted to introduce to everyone, and I'm going to go ahead and unmute his microphone, is Mr. Gregoire. And so Gregoire is a colleague of mine at Citrix and a new mentor to the AG Leadership Academy. So Gregoire, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, telling everybody a brief synopsis of your story. And Gregoire and I are planning on having another conversation that will be a part of our 5-part series. We'll learn a little bit more about Gregoire's story, but Gregoire, go ahead. The floor is yours, sir.
I appreciate you, Albert, and Professor Solomon. Albert, this has been an incredible session that you guys have conducted. Really touched by some of the stories you've shared. Obviously, hearing Ednis speak as well is really something. And I'll say one thing before I get into me on the study abroad. I never had the opportunity to study abroad, but one thing I did do throughout my entire academic career was travel abroad frequently. And French happens to be my first language. So Professor Solomon, I'm right there with you on wine and travel in Europe. But I guess what Albert wants to refer to, so my story, to be very brief, I ended up going through college and the university track extremely quickly. So I ended up graduating from Florida State as the youngest to graduate from the university in its history at 18 years old. And then when I went to the University of Miami to get my master's, I'm over here thinking I'm going to be there for a couple of years. And then at 19, I ended up walking out with my Master of Science. So the college track is something that I have some experience in navigating, in addition to how one of the things that I thought you guys brought up that was an extremely valuable point, and for everyone on the call that's either going into college or is already at that university stage, the networking aspect is huge. And those lasting relationships that you can create with not only the professors you encounter, but some of your fellow peers, and also the different things you can do from an extracurricular standpoint will forever shape how you go about in this world. Because I'm still connected with a lot of the professors that I encountered. And the vast majority of the peers that I have had run-ins with them in a professional space a decade down the line. And it is amazing how the brand that you start to build for yourself at that stage really factors into how you can have a strong foundation for the brand you build in your professional career. But I would truly, everything that you guys have said, I can only echo the same sentiments in that there is definitely a new wave in terms of trying to stay focused. So you're right about that, Professor Solomon. I think Albert was even testing me to see how quickly I'd respond when he said he was coming to me for thoughts. So it is amazing to see how students have evolved. Even though I only went to college all of 10 years ago, it's amazing to see how much has changed in 10 years. So truly, for everyone on the call that is listening, that is either in this stage or going into this stage, pay attention to what everybody's been saying, because they're words of wisdoms and golden nuggets that will forever be able to steer you down the right path.
Thank you so much for that. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. So if anyone does have any questions, go ahead and get them in before we conclude. But before I close, Professor Solomon, thank you not just for today, but for your support. From me, from when I was one of your students, your support with my nonprofit endeavors, it means so much, and I really appreciate you, and I really thank you for joining us this evening. And for all of our attendees, I hope everyone was able to take something from today. My goal with this webinar series is I can't touch anyone personally and physically right now, so I'm just going to try to do as many of these as we can over the next few weeks to just kind of try to spark something in your minds and just kind of spark the curiosity. And like Professor Solomon said, you have to be one of those people that love to learn. And so, I will be sharing, now that Professor Solomon gave her permission, I will be sharing some of those guides that she sent out. So for all of the panelists, I have everyone's email addresses, so you will be getting that. Just to kind of go back, I know we had a few people that joined us a little late. So we are doing a 5-part speaker series here at the AG Leadership Academy, and our next one is going to be how to get an internship. So interning was something that was extremely critical for my career. I started an internship at 18 years old. I had 3 different internships while I was in college, and one when I was in London as well. So that's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and something that really, in my opinion, set me up for success long term. So that's going to be our next one. So for all of you that follow us on social media, you should see an announcement about that next week. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you all for your attention, and thank you all for caring enough to join a webinar to talk about being successful in college. On that note, I'll say good night, and everyone have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.